What's up, guys? I'm EJ. I'm joined by Kendall, and today we're doing our Young Justice episode recap. Today we're talking about episode 9. This episode is called Odnu, which I believe is just a reversal because we're doing our magical or majestic arc here. So really, I think it means undo. And this is an interesting episode, guys, because one, we're dealing with a lot of obscure characters that I'll be honest, I wasn't as familiar with coming into this episode. I ended up doing a lot of research before and after this episode when we got it done, and some interesting kind of backstory behind the man himself, Vandal Savage, the guy that continues to kind of be this kind of just this kind of every kind of guy who's just everywhere. A guy who has kind of his imprints on every aspect of the DC universe within this Earth 16, and we're learning that more and more. We learn about how the stuff with the metahumans and how all the metahumans are descendants to him. And we learn about this interesting a bond that he forms with Klarion that dates back, millenniums at this point. So, pretty crazy episode. Shamari, just initial thoughts on this episode and this new arc that we're involved with that includes and is being led by Zatanna.
Yeah. So, I thought it was okay. I thought it was okay. It's definitely a very introductory episode, setting the stage. This is one of those setting the stage episodes. Get to know these new characters that people aren't very familiar with. I know I'm not very familiar with EJ. I know you said you weren't very familiar with. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Maybe Kendall's more familiar with.
Absolutely.
Sure, Kendall's read all of those comics. But yeah, no, I'm not very familiar with it. But I mean, it was good. It was solid. I like the characters, and I thought I did a decent job. So yeah, I thought it was pretty solid. Also, happy holidays to everybody out there.
Yeah, Shamari looking very festive with the with the holiday Christmas hat on.
Christmas spirit.
Yeah, bringing joy to the new generation audience. Kendall, what did you kind of make of this episode? We again, I thought one of the more interesting aspects was this backstory to Vandal Savage and learning, just how deep his imprint is on this Earth 16 that we know and love. I mean, he is the founder of Atlantis. I mean, think about that. I mean, that's a pretty kind of mind-boggling kind of assumption there, that this world that I guess at this point in time, I guess because where the Earth was above ground, he called it Atlantis, but ends up being the underground kingdom that we know. Of course, Aquaman and so many other underwater characters to come from. A lot to learn about this Vandal Savage that we're continuing to figure out from this episode, and I'm sure we're gonna learn a lot more.
Yeah. This was an interesting episode. A lot of interesting, more like you guys mentioned, more obscure characters. I thought the Vandal Savage sort of storyline, B plot was probably my favorite part of the episode. Getting more backstory on him. I mean, obviously he's a great character. He's a character we've talked about on our podcast. Hopefully they may give him a movie or something like that, because there's a lot of stories obviously you can tell with that character. But yeah, I mean, obviously his origin, it reminded me a little bit of Apocalypse with the whole metahuman, being the first metahuman, and then them kind of spawning from him, and that whole ordeal. But yeah, I mean, I thought this was an interesting episode. I was sort of wondering if we were going to get our first Marvel crossover at the beginning, when I thought we were getting the Watcher for a second. But I thought this was an interesting episode. Like you guys mentioned, learned a lot, in terms of some of these different characters I didn't know existed. Some of them didn't realize, maybe I knew who they were, but didn't realize I wanted to see them in any sort of extended DC material. So, interesting episode.
Kendall was watching the first moments of this episode and was like, "Time,
space. Ponder the question."
I'm the Watcher. I'm your guide. This was again. I thought this was a very interesting episode. And Shamari, I feel like it really is a dichotomy to the last arc, because the last arc dealt with a lot of familiar characters. We know obviously Artemis very well. We know a lot of the Bat family characters very well. We know Lady Shiva very well. We know the League very well. There wasn't that much unfamiliarity we had to really deal with. A lot of those characters are very well known, even the ones that may be a little more obscure, like maybe an orphan or a spoiler, something that you could look in 2 minutes and learn everything about. So uh, this is the total opposite. I mean, we're dealing with very obscure characters. We talk about someone like Child and Flaw. These are characters that you would have had to read some really deep mystical comics from the 80s to kind of know who these characters are. Even
Yep.
we're familiar with this Klarion, but he's not a very well known villain. And then even some of the young heroes that we see are Zatanna training. So it's kind of a totally different kind of a new slate. What do you kind of make of just the tone shift that comes with that when you're dealing with so much more unfamiliarity as opposed to the last arc we dealt with?
I'm cool with the unfamiliarity. I think the show does it very well, so I don't have any issue with it.
Mm-hmm.
Justice League Unlimited did that very well.
Yeah.
I think this show also does that very well. They do a very good job of introducing new characters. The last season was mostly new characters in terms of the main people, and they did that extremely well. So I had no problem at all with the introduction of new characters. So I'm looking forward to learning more. I know these arcs have been smaller, but I mean, I like these characters so far. We haven't gotten much from them. They have magic powers. They each have their own kind of magical thing about them, but I like it so far. I'm digging it.
It's interesting because when you talked about comparing the way this show uses obscure characters to Justice League Unlimited, like Justice League Unlimited, a lot of times it was for maybe one-off episodes. Maybe
right.
Yes, exactly.
About the Question, or one-off about Captain Atom or somebody like that who. Even then, now they're more high profile now because they're them being featured in Justice League Unlimited. But,
Right.
Now if we saw them in this, we'd be like, oh snap, it's Captain Atom, it's Captain Atom. But at the time, I didn't know who these people were. But like in this show, they're making these people like central figures that you're gonna follow for multiple episodes. These aren't just Easter eggs or one-offs where it's like let's tell one shot about a character that nobody knows. So that's what's even more unique about this.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you didn't watch, or excuse me, if you didn't read, Amethyst, Princess of Gemworld from the '80s, you don't know really anything about Kid. And
that sounds like an MMO game or.
I promise, Amethyst is indeed a real DC character. Gemworld is a real DC character, and I saw a lot of people on Twitter were saying, "Hey, we're gonna get introduced to Gemworld or Amethyst," and I'm just like, "Wow, people even know about this stuff." I'm not that familiar with it, and I'm someone who reads a ton of comics. Never been as intrigued by the mystical stuff, especially with DC. But I think those fans are going to be really excited to have this, and I just think it speaks to just how bold this creative team is. We saw that last season where that team decided that I know you guys have been used to seeing the story driven by characters like Nightwing or Dick Grayson and Artemis Croc and Connor Kent and Magan, but while they're still going to be a part of it, the story's really going to be driven by Brian Markov and Halo or Violet, and Forger, characters that a lot of people aren't as familiar with. It kind of speaks to what they feel like is the strength of the DC universe and really kind of flexing that strength to its highest order. I think it helps too because it brings a sense of kind of unpredictability to the show too, because if you don't have as much familiarity with all these characters, you don't know which characters are more expendable than others, or what's going to happen, because there's so much lore and so many well-known stories about them that are told through generations that everybody knows about everything about them. It kind of takes away in some ways Greg's like great strength of like taking a story you think and twisting it on its head like he did with Terra last year. Here it's like there's not much to know, and the little that you do know, I can still mix around, because a lot of people thought that when they saw Child, they thought it was Shivering Jemmy, who was a different Lord of Chaos, which we'll have to talk to about in a second too. And instead of them being someone totally different. So it's kind of interesting how this whole thing ended up shaking out with this arc and how it's begun.
Yeah, no, I think that there are a lot of different characters and stories that they tell that I think Weissman I think he is like, now that it's not on Cartoon Network, I think he's allowed to use even more now, because I think
Right.
anybody that's still watching the show after in season 4,
On
or
a
probably,
streaming, who bought a streaming service to watch
yeah,
it,
who
by
bought
the
a
way.
streaming service, before they brought it on DC Universe, or the DC
Right.
centric
Yeah.
streaming service, we're assuming
Right.
that these people are hardcore DC fans. Like
Yeah.
season 1, they kind of had to use and Superboy, and use the
Yeah.
Justice League, to sell toys, and we know the game. We know how to play
Right.
the game when it comes to animation. But
Right.
now that we've gotten past that, now they can, you're not going to lose as many people, because you're not going to have the quote unquote casuals as much. There are going to be some people that really liked what they got in season 1 and 2. Maybe aren't hardcore
Mm-hmm.
DC fans that still like the show, and those people will still enjoy it because it's a good show. But you're not worried about trying to bring new people in at this point.
I think that's an excellent point, Kendall. And this whole episode really centers around this kind of idea of the universe being kind of centered around this idea of order and chaos, and that when the Big Bang happened and the universe was created, there were these quote unquote lords of chaos and lords of order that were created, are elemental, as the words that are used in this episode, to the universe, that allow there to be balance. And if there's one of one thing, they need to be balance of the other in order for it to all work out. And it even says that the universe that preceded this universe was destroyed because there wasn't this balance. So, it kind of raises the stakes of kind of maybe what the kind of conflict is with this episode, because you see that one universe was ended because they couldn't figure this whole thing out. This new balance that we've had is gone now for millions of years, so I guess it's gone pretty well, but still a kind of a crazy thing to kind of introduce. So we learn in this episode, Sham, that basically, again, there's these lords of order and chaos, and a lord of chaos is sent to Earth. The energy that is sent to Earth ends up, blacking out Manhattan, creates this crazy energy wave that's picked up by Zatanna and the young hero she's training. We're introduced to that force being Child, and then of course they create Flaw. Again, very obscure DC characters that you would not know. A lot of people probably aren't familiar with. And it kind of sets up this conflict that we see that's juxtaposed to an early interaction between Vandal Savage, kind of in his whole primitive stage, and Klarion. So we learned that Klarion is someone who's lived, since the beginning of time, because he is one of the original Lords of Chaos. So, what did you kind of make just of how they kind of mended those stories together, and where do you kind of think you see this going? It feels to me that through whatever bond was formed between Klarion and Vandal from their early interaction, perhaps this is kind of the undoing of that, perhaps, or perhaps maybe this is the Lords of Chaos saying, "Wait a minute, Clarion's not doing his job because he's coinciding with this mere mortal." Though we know, of course, Vandal is a metahuman.
All right, so I'm gonna keep it real with you guys. All right, so
Well, all we want is real, Shan. We don't want anything less.
I know we're supposed to. I know I have to say in the head. I'm supposed to bring the joy. I'm supposed to bring the jolly. Clarion's kind of annoying, man. He's not my favorite. I'll put it this way. He is definitely bottom tier when it comes to light and just villains, justice in general.
Are you sending Klarion? Are you sending Klarion a present of coal? Is he getting coal in his stocking this Christmas season?
I don't think he's getting anything. I don't know if he's getting anything.
Yeah,
he's getting. I don't know what he's getting, honestly. Maybe he like coal. Maybe I should get him good stuff. So because he hates all the good things. But yeah, no, I'm not a Klarion fan. So I'm not sure where they're going with Klarion specifically. I feel like I'm much more excited about whatever's going on with the Child and Flaw and all of that stuff.
Baymax.
Baymax, as Kendall calls him. So yeah, I'm not sure where they're going. I'm much more excited about the Child. I want to see where that goes. I want to see Dr. Fate. I want to see. I hope to see Constantine. I don't know if we're getting Constantine. I haven't said anything about Constantine showing up. But I hope we get some Constantine. But I like the setup that they did. I think it's cool that the other chaos being showed up, became a child, is causing whatever they're going to cause. I think that's cool. I want to see where that leads. Klarion, they summoned Klarion. I don't know if there's probably going to be some kind of info dump there with regards to whatever their purpose is on Earth. But this just, hopefully is less Klarion, more child. I'll just put it that way.
Well, I think what ended up happening, Kendall, I think you'll probably see a lot of Klarion versus child. Because I think that
maybe
because I think when we see that conversation with Vandal Savage, where first of all Klarion, they really showed his strength probably more so this episode than any episode, because you see back in the day he's just slaughtering all those metahumans that are now we know the offspring of Vandal Savage, but also killing Vandal Savage a bunch of times. So considering that he's this kind of being that's created at the beginning of the universe, it makes sense that he would be this strong. But what perhaps doesn't make sense is why he would align with someone who he can defeat so easily. I think we're going to learn more about that kind of over time, and I think it's probably why Child appears on Earth.
Yeah, I mean, that'll be a storyline to pay attention to. This episode was strange because it didn't feel like, it felt like it was the beginning of the arc. I mean, we know it's the beginning of the arc, but it almost felt like it could have been a one-off, and then they could have moved on to something else. They really wanted to. Yeah. Like in the olden days of Young Justice.
That's what they would have done.
That's what they would have done. They would have just moved to a different story and maybe gone back to it, but this would have been more of a one-off kind of thing. So it'll be interesting to see how they, pick up from there. But like you said, it's almost like a new format with the way they're doing the show. I don't hate Klarion as much as Shamari does.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
I think he serves his purpose. This is interesting because this is going to be as much of him as we've gotten, again, because it's not the one-off format anymore.
Right.
Like, have we ever gotten three or four straight episodes?
Yeah. I don't think we have. I think that's a good point.
So it'll really test the metal right now.
He's not featured in the show very much. In those little times where he is there, I don't like seeing him.
Right.
So we'll see how it goes.
Trivia question: do you guys know who created Klarion? Klarion the Witch Boy, they call him.
No.
All right, Kendall's doing the comic book.
Doing it.
I'm sure our viewers.
I have no idea.
Smashing
the keyboards.
I better get it right.
Shamari, how do you not know this?
Jack Kirby.
I was thinking Jack Kirby too. I wanted to say
you should have threw out a guess, man.
I know I should have threw out a guess of Jack Kirby.
I only got that from the credits. They gave Jack Kirby a credit.
That was
Klarion,
dope.
Created by Jack
Kirby.
Kirby.
Maybe I should take that back then. If the GOAT created Klarion.
The ghosts of Christmas past and Jack Kirby are gonna be pulling up on Shamari. So Kendall had mentioned earlier that he thought that the Vandal Savage aspect of this episode was the strongest part. Was that the same for you, Sham? What did you think of just how they explained more of Vandal's story, him creating civilizations before he, has his run-in with Klarion, and kind of where it takes him to today, where clearly he's still very involved. Because by the end of the episode, he's with Phantom Stranger, who by the comic book accounts usually is either an agent of Order or a Lord of Order himself. What did you make of kind of that storyline, how they continue to build up this character in Vandal Savage? This is now like almost a 3-season build-up that we're talking about at this point. We've still never seen him fully invested or involved in scrapping with anybody that we deal with, but we continue to learn more about him here.
Yeah, I thought it was good. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know if it was the best part of the episode. I did like I guess the fight they had with Klarion in the shop.
That was a good
the shop area. But But I thought it was cool. I always liked those Vandal Savage flashbacks. Those are some of the best scenes in the show. Um, for me personally, I don't know. I'm sure it's probably not the case for everyone. So so yeah, I mean, I thought it was cool. I mean, I have to see more. I'm just not a Clarion guy, so that kind of is like, all right, the Clarion is just some guys. It's like, all right,
but
Clarion backstory is not as interesting to me. I know it was more Vandal
yeah,
Savage focused, but it was also Clarion backstory.
yeah.
So it's like, I mean, all right, sure, you know.
But I think it did.
Um,
I think what I did like about it though was I did feel like it made more sense why Vandal Savage would have someone like Clarion in his circle. Clarion is so Vandal
yeah,
Savage is like the ultimate strategist. He's the ultimate kind of tactician, and someone as like just flat out as annoying as Clarion, and someone
yeah,
who's somewhat hot headed as Clarion.
and
You would
unpredictable, yeah.
think that that's someone that Vandal Savage would not want to have in like his super cabal like Illuminati like group. But I think what we see with Vandal with some of these relationships is that like he's kind of like a loyal dude when it comes to like you know me from the bottom. I'm gonna keep you in my circle as long as you keep me in your circle. We saw that with Darkseid,
Right.
and I feel like we're kind of seeing that here where it's
It
like
was
he
so
kind
EJ, day one.
of he's all about his day ones, so he kind of I did kind of it did kind of tell me about Vandal to kind of see this thing with Clarion because okay, this makes sense why this character who's again very annoying, very hot headed, again like Shamari said, somewhat unpredictable, is so close. Not just because he's very valuable, and we even learn more about his value in terms of power, but also there's kind of a bond there that now spans again millenniums at this point. I think that was kind of a useful use of Clarion in that regard to learn more about Vandal and have that make sense of his character. I do want to talk about the team that we see. So Zatanna is training the young group. We see Khalid Nasor, we see Mary Broomfield, and we see Tracy 13. Um, it seems like this is a group that still kind of get their footing in terms of their majestic powers. It was great to kind of see New York City once again being used. Something we usually see for like Marvel. It's kind of interesting to kind of see it used in DC, of the DC lore. Kendall, what did you think of just kind of what we saw with the reintroduction of Tracy 13 and the introduction with Mary and Khalid in this story?
I hate when DC uses real cities.
Really, really.
Yeah, because it just throws off the map. I'm like, so
Oh, I disagree.
where's
I
Gotham?
disagree.
As a
I prefer
Nightwing
real
fan who
cities.
loved when Nightwing was
Well,
working out
now
of New York City,
I think Marvel has it up on DC.
I know, I agree with that. I agree with that. But when DC uses real
I think
cities,
Metropolis is in Smallville are very few, or the little few
right?
exceptions.
My problem is that when DC uses those cities, then it just throws everything off because it's like I thought like Metropolis is Chicago. Wait, so where's Chicago then? Like, where is Metropolis? Like that throws everything off. Whereas Marvel, you know where all these places are. It's very stated. So,
yeah.
but yeah, this was in New York. I would have guessed it was Gotham, until he did pointed it out. But yeah, I think those characters, it breathed a breath of fresh air to see, a new group of young heroes. I think it's interesting how, although this show has been in arcs and we followed some of the characters that have aged up, they've also still kept it true to the Unjustice spirit by introducing new characters
For sure.
or younger characters and featuring them in these specific arcs.
Yeah.
Obviously, even though we had the McGann arc with Superboy, we obviously had Beast Boy and we had McGann's sister and whatnot. And then from there, we saw the other characters that were with the Tigress character.
Yeah. No, Orphan was a big part of that story, and Orphan is a young character, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So, I thought it was cool, and these are characters that obviously I don't think we'll see them. I think we'll see these characters evolve over time, but I don't think it'll be much this season. I mean, Greg Weisman has talked about in the past that the Mary Broomfield character was actually on the team or a part of the team between season 1 and 2, and that she had a whole backstory that we just never saw that happened off screen. Which again, sometimes my problem with the show is that when you do the time jumps, I mean, 5 years is a lot. A lot of
Right.
stuff can happen in 5 years. A
Yeah.
lot of, as we see in this show, like a lot of stuff can happen in 30 days, let alone 5 years. So,
Yeah.
um,
And that kind of brings out interest. It kind of brings an interesting kind of, it brings an interesting kind of element to the stories involving these characters because, while I agree, sometimes it's frustrating because you're like, all right, well, we only, unless they do flashbacks, we're gonna only get exposition to kind of learn about this, and we kind of see Mary talk about, oh yeah, well, because during the training, in which they all kind of they did their thing and they all had some certain issues that Zatanna thought they should have done better. Her criticism to Mary was, you're still thinking too much like a superhero. I want to see you really kind of embrace the creativity of your magic as opposed to relying on just I guess, just winning the mission, so to speak. And, it hurt Mary, and Mary, when Khalid kind of asked her, what does she mean by that? Mary goes back to a time where she was like, yeah, well, I was a hero. I was, Sergeant. I know in the comics she's just using Sergeant Marvel. It sounds like maybe she was Sergeant Shazam in this iteration. And it kind of speaks to, we see Batman bringing these young folks, bringing people on the team. We see Nightwing bring people onto the team. And, all we see, besides, I guess, Brion in theory, are, like, these success stories. But we don't see the heroes that, like, they bring in that, like, maybe for some reason, other reason, don't work out. And I know that was kind of an interesting kind of lane to kind of follow, where you have someone who's clearly, like, a hero who didn't work out on being on the team, so to speak. But someone like Zatanna still keeping them in the fold does speak to, so maybe something that they still see in her, that maybe Mary will eventually get that shot again. But Shamar, I just thought that was an interesting kind of just idea that we just never really explored. Was like, what happens if you have someone who's on the team that doesn't work out and goes back to being a superhero, or going what do they do after that? I guess again, Brion's probably the first person we've seen with that, but that seemed like such an extreme example. I thought this was kind of a little more of a subtle example that I thought I enjoyed.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was cool. Nice little thing, to drop in there. I agree, Ken. I think there is definitely a bit of a downside to some of the more extreme time skips where you're just like, wait, so what happened to this one? What happened to that one?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree. I mean, we'll learn more about these characters over the next, few episodes. So these arcs are pretty small. They're not season. It's not going to be season long, so we're not going to get as familiar with them as we are with people like Brion or Forager or any of the other ones from last season. But we'll get a little bit of them. So I do have a question for you guys. What do you think is going on with Beast Boy?
Yeah, I was gonna say we should probably get to the C plot here this episode. Shout out to Blue Devil. We got to see Blue Devil in this episode.
Yeah, shout
out. That's the episode. Of course, the character. If you watch Swamp Thing, there's a deep backstory with him on that show. I mean, clearly, there was I know Kendall said he didn't really love seeing his guy Beast Boy like this, and I think it's a sad day for Kendall. I think he's not, and that's what I expected, was we're not gonna be moving away from this story they're trying to tell with Beast Boy. That is very sad. I mean, clearly he's depressed. I think it was good to finally see someone try to take even if it was the mildest of actions to even notice that, hey, he's very off. Someone we should check in on him and see what's going on. But yeah, clearly he's having problems sleeping, which is why he's so tired all the time. You see him go to the pharmacy to pick up sleeping pills, and what happened to Connor and to everybody on Mars. That whole experience seems to have really affected him in a negative way. And we see now this episode takes place on March 13th. May 13th. So we're now more than a month away from when he's returned, and we're still he's still having this issue. And I think that's important to show, for the story they want to tell about depression, that it's not something that's just a 1 day thing or 2 day thing and you're just okay. Sometimes this is something that goes on for a long time, for weeks, months, sometimes even years. And it's sad to see. It's even sad to see Beast Boy go in, like when Blue Devil tries to approach him and Beast Boy tries to put on the Beast Boy act. He puts on the voice, hey BD, what's going on? He just looks sad. It was sad to see. He's down bad right now, and all we gotta do is just hope that he get the right help he needs to get out of it. But it's not fun, not a fun story to see at all.
Yeah. It makes me wonder where what's the end game with this story? Where is the end game? Just Beast Boy's depressed and
he gets his help. Like he gets the help,
and he goes to a therapist,
right,
or something.
We've seen that sometimes in shows where they it's like a it's like a almost like a public address.
Yeah,
Address
yeah, kind of like a public service announcement.
Yeah.
Where it's not about who done it or something like that.
Yeah,
As much
exactly.
as
Yeah,
it is like just trying to tell a story.
I wouldn't
just
be
saying, hey,
surprised.
something.
Yeah, I wouldn't be. And when I watched this episode, I mean, again, it's disturbing to watch Beast Boy go through this. I kind of thought that they might, at some point, they might have to put a disclaimer on one of these episodes, if it gets as dark as it may get. I don't know.
I mean,
We
if
don't
it
know
gets
where
there.
it's going. Yeah,
Right,
but I mean, they're walking down that path, as scary as it is.
Wasn't
Man, it's just important.
It's not on Cartoon Network, so they don't have to do the Static Shock. Where Static Shock had to throw some disclaimers in there.
Yeah.
Some of their episodes about when they tackle racism or when they tackle
shooting,
gun violence and whatnot. But this is like you said, a dark storyline. Again, it makes it more, like it makes it more almost like real, but unfortunate when you use the Greg Sipes voice because it's like
I was about to
you
say
said,
that. Yeah.
He's so connected to Happy Beast Boy, jolly happy-go-lucky Beast Boy, and so then you throw in this storyline and it kind of throws you for a loop. But yeah,
And again, especially when he goes into that voice, but he's trying to be happy-go-lucky Beast Boy. It just shout out to Greg Sykes. I mean, that's some great voice acting to even hear it in his voice how like kind of phony it is. Like again, it's painful. It's a painful thing to watch.
Yeah, I mean, this is a show that's dealt with, that.
Artemis.
Yeah, Artemis to a degree. I was even
Yeah.
thinking season 1, after the episode where they were in the simulation and they thought everybody died.
Yeah.
And they had to go through the therapy sessions with Black Canary. So that was, and that's what EJ talks about, where that was more of a snap thing where they
and that's a great thing you mentioned, Kendall, because I wonder if there's something to be said too about maybe a criticism of the outsiders as an entity. Because remember when Batman created that covert team, I mean they had Justice League resources. They had training, they had the people, counselors and then therapists if they needed therapists. And shout out to Black Canary for being able to be that for them. Like, the outsiders that we kind of know, they're kind of just on their own. They're kind of doing their own thing. Like, it's like they gave them a credit card and said, all right, go crazy. They have, the Zeta tubes and they have some of the stuff that helps them in terms of communication. But do they have the real support? I know part of the gimmick was that they're kind of just on their own. But maybe this is also kind of a sign here, or maybe there needs to be more intervention. I know Blue Devil says that he was meant to be there to kind of be somewhat of a chaperone, so to speak. But it definitely seems way more loose than what was going on
right. He almost seems like more
on what's the name on Happy Harbor.
Right.
Dorm
RA.
What is that? Oh, the Dorm RA. Yeah, the Dorm RA. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Happy Harbor. It was much different. So I don't know if that's I would love to interview Greg Weisman, but I don't know if that's on purpose. But I just think that's an interesting thing you mentioned. I think that's a great point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very interesting.
So I guess we've gotten through most of this episode. I guess just last thoughts on the conflict we see. Kendall, just how do you see it playing out with this new character and child and what's going to be this showdown with Klarion? I feel like it's setting up perhaps a Klarion and Zatanna kind of alliance is going to have to be had to defeat Child, because we see they present Child to be quite sadistic. She dismembers that security guard shortly after killing him very quickly as soon as she comes to Earth. What do you make just kind of just where you see that story playing out as we move forward?
Yeah, I mean that'll be interesting. That'll be interesting to follow. I mean, I feel like it's tough because this is I think this is one of the harder ones to sort of forecast, because like the whole thing is it's such a new concept,
Right.
like the whole or agent of order, agent of chaos, kind of concept is so foreign. But I mean, it seems like they are billing the child and flaw characters as at least the initial big bad. Will there be another entity that we see show up? I think that's possible, because again, they have to stretch this out. It went kind of quick, you know, the way they did it, the way they told it in this. There's going to be a lot of layers that they have to peel back in this, as we saw in the last arc. There were a million different layers, and even in the first arc with Malifaux, a million different layers that you have to continue to pull. The other thing that was interesting, what did you guys make of the credit scene? I mean, was that, and it was that? Do we think that was just nothing, or was that?
Yeah, that was weird. I mean, you got Saturn Girl and the Legion of Superheroes, you know, sitting there, they're watching, you know, Beast Boy show.
Yeah, it's Star Trek show.
Star Trek show, yeah.
Space Trek.
Space Trek, yeah. Star Trek is the actual show. Space Trek, I believe, is the show that he does. Yeah, I don't know what that was about. I mean, again,
I was wondering because they seem so like.
I thought it was just an Easter egg.
It may just be an Easter egg, but like they almost seem so like chill that I'm like.
They seem so chill. Yeah.
Did they know that Superboy is fine? You know,
I think so. I don't think it's
kind of like chilling.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, it seems like some time has elapsed since then.
Right. So maybe it's just normal. Maybe some people just take things differently, and they don't really know Superboy, as far as we know.
But we didn't even see the resolution of anything they did on Mars, which is
so then just show them.
I also wonder when they're gonna show personally.
Right. We didn't see we see obviously McGann's resolution on Mars. We saw that in just an episode a couple weeks ago, but we don't see anything from the League, the Legion. Yeah. You know, they just
they're not scrapping with that other guy anymore.
Right. So we don't know. So we don't know. We don't know what happened with that. So. The credit scene was interesting. I think it leads us to believe that there's probably more to be told with that story moving forward. Also to note, just the whole Lords of Chaos, Lords of Order kind of ordeal. It's important to know we're gonna have Dr. Fate in this arc. He of course is a Nobu is a Lord of Order according to the comics, while Dr. Fate being using Nobu is then an agent of Order, and then the Wizard, who of course is where Shazam gets his powers from. That's also where, in turn, Mary gets her powers from. Is also a Lord of Order as well. So there are plenty of ties to this whole concept that we see in the show. I think we're gonna see those ties play out throughout these episodes. But I think it's a good time to give scores. I'll let Sham go first. What are you gonna give this score for this episode 9 of Young Justice?
I give this a 7.5 out of 10. Yeah, I thought it was okay. It was a decent episode. A couple of some good fight scenes. It's a good introduction to some of the new characters that we're going to be, dealing with in this arc. And you got Vandal Savage, which is always a positive. You got the Light, which is always a positive. So yeah. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing what we got moving forward. I mean, it seems like it's going to be a lot of Klarion, which I'm not super excited about.
We now know,
Yeah. So
Shamari came in as Santa Claus, and he's leaving the show as a Scrooge.
Yeah. Apparently, I'm the mean guy. I'm the mean guy on the show. But yeah. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm excited to see Dr. Fate. I think that'll bring the scores up pretty high once he shows up.
Yeah, I think they'll definitely need Dr. Fate's help to deal with whatever chaos is going to come from Child and Flaw. Kendall, what are you going to give this episode 9 of Young Justice?
I'll go 7.5 as well. I thought there were some nice moments. I like the Vandal Savage stuff. I echo Shamari's sentiments. Whenever we get more of the Light, I mean, I would love just a Light show. I would watch that, and that would probably be really, really good. But yeah, I mean, whenever you include those characters, that's always going to be a boost. Again, wasn't super familiar with the characters that they introduced in this episode, but they were all portrayed pretty well. I thought they all did a pretty good job. So, overall, this isn't gonna be my favorite arc probably, but interesting to see how this will tie into the larger story, and if it does, or if it doesn't, what's going to be the significance of it? Those would be the questions we'll ask.
Well, I think that the most likely it will, because of we see the Light in this episode, and right. I feel like the Light is going to eventually make its presence felt in this episode. We got a little bit of a taste of what they're doing in Markovia, where we know Dr. Jace is working with them to kind of create more metahumans, and And that like that guy that was with Brion is working now with the light, and he's influencing him to do things that will bring about more metahuman. So I think that there will be end up being tied to all this at some point. I think at the end of the day, this whole story I think is about the light trying to get even with these kids that have been meddling with them for the last 10 years. I think for me, I will go. I'll give this one an 8. And maybe that feels generous for you guys. Maybe I should be wearing the Santa Claus hat. Maybe I'm in the Christmas spirit.
Yeah, man, you need
higher.
a Santa.
Going a little higher for this episode. I'm gonna give it an 8 because I thoroughly enjoyed the Vandal Savage tie-in this week. That to me elevated this episode a little bit more, and I also thought that adding Beast Boy struggle to this too, like we've mostly seen two like a A and a B story almost every episode. This is one of the few this season we've seen a C story, and I thought the B and C kind of elevated this episode a little bit. Again, Vandal's kind of backstory, learning more about just how much of an influence this character has on this DC universe, and just how much everything that happens stems from him. Again, it's building to this eventual showdown that I think we'll see at some point that is going to be epic, because we continue to learn more and more about this character and how epic he is. And then, Beast Boy struggle. Again, very sad to see, but very well executed in terms of the emotions they're trying to elicit. And a nice, eclectic kind of group of characters. Really, again, kind of showing the strength of the DC universe. Madam Xanadu, someone they introduced in this episode. We mentioned the heroes, seeing someone like Khalid kind of hear Kent Nelson's name and kind of perk up and wondering what that means for his future as potentially being Dr. Fate. We mentioned Mary, Tracy 13, someone we got introduced last season, seeing more of her this season. And then seeing Zatanna, being a leader. Again, not something we've seen much. We've seen her kind of be kind of a pseudo part of the team, and then she was kind of away from the team doing her own thing, and now kind of in the forefront, and seeing her kind of grow from that role as that young girl who's kind of figuring out her powers and trying to learn about her powers, dealing with this issue with her dad, to now kind of being a leader and a full-on adult and teaching other people how to be heroes. I think that's a really cool thing. So I enjoyed this episode a lot. I'll go as high as to give it an 8 for this week, but that'll do it for this episode of our Young Justice recap and review. Of course, if you enjoyed us and you enjoyed this episode, make sure you give us a like and a comment. If you enjoyed this as much as I think you should, maybe even give us a subscribe. Hit that subscribe button there, New Generation Media, where you can get all of our content, plenty of sports stuff, plenty of hero stuff. And of course, if you like us as well, make sure you check out our podcast we do every week. You can find that on the New Generation Podcast Network. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and Stitcher is where you'll find that. Thank you guys again for checking us out. For Shamari, for Kendall, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace.